so much for sitting with us. So we it's our 125th anniversary. Founded in 1901. We're sitting in the building. First home of Citizens Bank of Edmond. Back in the day, I think it was Citizens National Bank when it was first chartered, and your family's been part of it since very, very early days. So 1906, 07-ish, around statehood, the Granzow family became involved with the bank. Such an honor to sit down and just kind of talk about the history. I have the fortunate opportunity to hear about it quite often, but I'm excited to be able to preserve it for everybody to be able to access it and to hear about the 125 years and so much of it that is in your brain and heart that we get to talk about.
Yeah, so. The heart for sure. It was kind of an interesting story. Granddad was graduated from a business school in Iowa and came down to start a banking career, and he had a relative in the banking business in Hera. He came down, was there for a little while, found out that this place was trying to get some new personnel, new management, or whatever they were trying to do, and so he came and applied and got the job, and basically the family's been here ever since. But he was a very good sense of character. He was really good at that, and so when he started lending money and doing all the stuff he did, he was really successful because he was such a good judge of character, so he carried that on through his whole career. But he had to go through a lot to get everything going. He had to go through the Depression and World War II under his helm, and so it was kind of a tough time to get through all those things, but he persevered and made it all happen, and we're still here much later, but he was town was very small back then, very, very small, and so everybody kind of knew everybody, and the town was confined, pretty small area, so it was a really interesting time for him to get into something brand new and kind of develop it from there, make it all happen. Down the road, Dad went to World War II, came back after World War II, started working in, I believe, 1946, and continued on till the late 80s with him. Granddad worked over 50 years in here, so one capacity or another. So he was involved, and so strangely enough, the three of us never worked together exactly.
Really? I thought there was
there wasn't really a crossover on that. It was close. We almost got there, but I was still in college when Granddad died, so I never did. I did work one little summer here in this building, and
so your dad was there.
Granddad had already retired. Dad was here.
Oh.
Granddad had retired, so I kind of missed that little opportunity too. So we had a lot of history in this building, obviously. And in 1967, when I was working here, we have these gigantic windows to our left here, and the building that we're in now was being built, and that came when they bought out. Actually, I think 3 or 4 businesses they had to buy out to get the space to build that building. But basically, it was a drugstore on the corner and a dry goods store next to it, and then of course the jewelry store was next to that on the other side. But anyway, they bought as much as they could buy at the time, and said we really wanted to get more, but we just couldn't get the other people to sell or do whatever they wanted to do. So it ended up with that footprint over there, exactly the way it was.
And it had a drive-through even then.
It did. And so, it did. On the east side over here, it was a very, very tight turn. I'm telling you, very extremely tight. Yeah. And you could only put about 3 cars in there max, and you probably had 1 car in the street at that. But it was a really tight turn, and it was there for quite a while, and then eventually we got some more property and built a new drive-in and changed it all up.
Was that your dad's vision then, to build that building? And
he was, yeah, it was. He wanted to do that. He said, we need more, we're growing town. We need more space. We're going to need to hire more people. We need to do the things that we need to do to get down the road here. So he wanted to do that, and it worked out relatively well. I would say I've never been completely satisfied that they could have done maybe a little better job of building the building over there and making it a little more space friendly. But since you've been around and expanded it and whatever, it's a heck of a lot better now than it ever was back then. I can promise you. But yeah, it was a real neat thing, kind of something new in town, And then the other bank in town, they built a new building too, so everybody was changing buildings all at the same time. It was kind of a funny situation, but it worked out.
Yeah, we were doing a little bit of research to see kind of what banks were in town back in 1901 and which
Mm-hmm.
ones are still around, and then none of them are.
That's true.
So then we expanded that to like, well, when we started, are there any banks in Oklahoma City Metro that are
Right.
still around? And the answer was no. And then we went to Oklahoma County, and it was the same thing. Like Citizens is the only one that's survived since 1901.
That's kind of an unusual entity for sure. I think
Yeah.
there might be some small banks in some of the rural areas
There are,
that,
yeah.
that have still that kind of history, but
Mhm.
not too much around here. That's for sure. It's been one of those things that time just takes its place, and businesses expand and combine and do whatever they do, and it
Yeah.
just kind of makes it all happen.
What's been the secret, do you think, to surviving the 80s, the oil bust, the Great Depression, wars?
Well, there's part of it is really just good people skills, good management, that kind of thing. Part of it is really just kind of luck. Sometimes you're just lucky. You take the oil boom, fiasco in late 80s. Well, we didn't have a whole lot of loans or anything dealing with oil business.
Mhm.
That we didn't know a lot about it, so we didn't try to expand into that area. Everybody else was wanting to, but we just decided not to and kind of stick to what we knew, and it kind of worked itself out in the long run.
Yeah.
Of course, we had customers that were in that oil business, and they took a hit and all that other stuff. But for the most part, we kind of survived all of it. It wasn't terrible.
Yeah, I think your answer, every time I think about the Granzow family and what you all have done to build this bank, that humility of just like, well, it was luck, or it was, we were right place at the right time. That to me has been the thread between all the three generations, is that it's very humble. You don't see the Granzow name plastered all over town. The always modest and how they lived in our community, and just known for their kindness, and sometimes I think for your grandfather maybe more the sternness and
He was.
accountability.
He was. They didn't fool around with him too much.
I hear stories still from customers who said that they got their first loan and he gave it to them,
Yeah.
and he just basically said, you're going to run into trouble and not be able to pay, but your responsibility is to come to me and tell me and talk with me through that. That it seemed really great, not only to hold people accountable and be stern, but also to take risk, and that's something too where I saw with Gordon and with you.
That's the one thing I think that he was very determined to do. Was he goes, we're really only here for one purpose, and that's to help our customers be successful. We're here to protect their assets, but we're here to help them. And if we can help them along the way, whether it be a loan, advice, or whatever it might be, then we're going to be, doing our job. And as long as we're doing our job and we're doing it correctly, things will continue on. And then so I think he spread that over to my dad. My dad, a very quiet man, and most people that came in and got loans from him says, I did all the talking, and all the next thing I know, he's sitting there, he goes, okay, we're going to do it. And he goes, I don't know how that happened, but he goes, I didn't say much to hardly anybody really, but very, very calm person. But he was a very good judge of character also, so I think they kind of knew where they were going. I think that's kind of the game plan anyway. So we all had our different personalities, that's for sure, but it's all kind of worked itself out.
Tell me about working with your dad. That was a big overlap.
Yeah, that was the big overlap. Well, he was with Granddad for quite a while, but yeah, he and I were together for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever it was. And it was really funny because we would go days and not even say anything to each other. I mean, he didn't say much, and if I was busy, I just didn't come up and talk to him very much. But he was always trying to figure out a better way? Can we do something else to help the customers? Can we do something else to improve what we're doing and our efficiency on how we did it? And even when I first started, there was no account numbers, and it was all done by name, and you knew pretty much everybody's by name, and it was part of banking in those days. That's just the way you did it. And like these old ledgers are all handwritten. Well, that was just the gigantic books that they had to do everything with. It was all hand done, and it was very personal, and it was great. I liked it. I kept telling them, I said, we can't keep going on like this. We got to get a little bit more modernized here. We're going to be left behind. And sure enough, then, things picked up and everybody started doing a little more stuff. We finally got account numbers. And so there's a lot of us that still have the old original account numbers when they first assigned them. They were done alphabetically. So the first numbers were somebody with a last name of A, and so it worked out pretty well. So we're all, updated now and a lot more technology now than there has, of course, ever been. And probably it isn't slowing down any. So we'll see where it goes from here. But that's unfortunately your job, and we'll go from there. But
And he sat in the lobby,
he
right?
sat in the lobby, in the main part of the lobby. In fact, we all kind of had open offices and whatever, and then in those days, so it worked out really well because we could see pretty much every customer that came in, and we usually, if we didn't know them, we were probably going to get to know them, so we got a chance to visit with them a little bit and whatever. And a lot of old timers would come in and really didn't have any banking business to do. They just come in and visit with my dad for a while. Well, anyway, he was always available for anybody and everybody, and he was more than willing to sit down and talk to anybody, especially if there was something they had a problem with, that he felt like he could help them. That was always kind of the number one thing for sure. But yeah, he and I worked together for a long, long time, and he kind of got me going, got me through, because I wasn't exactly I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a banker or not. I guess is the best way to describe it. And as time went on, I said, there's things that I can do. I'm good at some things. I'm not so good at other things, but there's things I can do that can help, and we'll go from there and kind of try to make it as best environment we can for everybody. And that's kind of where I stepped in, I guess.
What's your favorite memory whenever you think about working with your dad and that kind of involved?
Couple, obviously, one that as everybody did back in those days, he would always be smoking all the time. Everybody was smoking, and so he was he was doing that, and so everybody would come in, and he was so darn calm that everybody would sit there and they kept waiting for his ashes to fall off his cigarette. They wouldn't fall off, he was just so dang calm.
I remember him having like the longest ash.
I never figured out how he did that either,
Very still.
Very still, yeah, very still. No, I remember when he wanted to make a really big kind of decision, maybe add somebody to the board or do this or do that. He would sit down and spend a lot of time explaining to me. He didn't really have to, but he would, why this is a good decision and why this person is an asset to what we're doing and this, that, and whatever. And it worked out really, really well. I've always been very, very happy, real happy with all our board members, and I can't thank enough people for all the employees that we had that were with us for multiple years. They did a great job of keeping everything in order. I guess the best way to describe that. So it worked out great, and I always appreciated him spending time to explain his decision process, not just make the decision and this is the way it is. And now there's a reason for most of this stuff, and he kind of went with that. So I always appreciated that. And the other thing I always appreciated a lot, and he felt this way not only about me but all our employees, he goes, we're going to make some mistakes, it happens, and he says, believe me, he goes, I've got your back no matter what. He says, I've got you. But he says, we'll figure out how to correct those mistakes and make it right for everybody the best we can. And if sometimes you just can't, but he says, most of the time there's an answer out there and we'll sit down and figure it out. And we'll figure out why you made the mistake and we'll just not let it happen again. So he was real easy to get along with as far as, and all the employees and the customer stuff. It was pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's such a gentle, kind
He
man.
was. He definitely was.
And then I think about your era, and I knew you were going to wear color today because you're colorful and fun. And there was something at the end of every day, at the end of the day, can you talk about the ritual? Because people talk about that even still.
Yeah. Unfortunately, probably for the bank, I would come up with these ideas that actually didn't make any sense whatsoever, but it didn't really matter to me whether it made any sense or not. I thought, this is a dumb idea, but I kind of like it, so we'll just do it, So I did different things over the years, but the one that became sort of famous was on Fridays. We would close from 3 to 4 and open up again at 4 and stay open till 7. So at 7 o'clock, I was pretty much ready to get out of the bank, and I think everybody else probably was too. So I said, what we need is a way to get all the customers out of the lobby quickly. So I thought, okay, what can I do? I thought I could go around and talk to them all and do that. And I said, no, that's too mundane. So I got a tape made of turn out the lights, the party's over. After I've made the tape of the theme to Rawhide.
Yeah.
And so at 7 o'clock, I would kind of at the end of the teller line, I would stand up kind of on the back of, well, not really on the back of a chair, kind of just on top of a chair a little bit. And
I heard it was like on top of the chair.
Well, maybe there's times maybe on top, but anyway, I would yell, head them up and move them out, just like they did on Rawhide.
Yes.
And then we'd hit the theme to Rawhide, and so you'd hear the theme to Rawhide going, and everybody's kind of looking around. Of course, I'm shouting. Everybody's kind of looking around like, what the heck's going on here? Well, anyway, I go, we would say something like, bank's closed, so we would, whoever was left. Well, it didn't work exactly like I had planned. Then we'd play Turn Out the Lights, the party's over. And people started hearing about it. So people started coming in at 7 o'clock to see what the heck we were going to do, and so now I got a whole herd of people in there and I'm trying to get them all out and I've got them all in, I'm going, not one of my better ideas, but it was pretty funny. I thought it was pretty entertaining,
It's awesome.
So, I mean, you don't hear that every day in a bank, so I thought that's a little bit different. So
I only heard like what you would say. I didn't know the reasoning behind it, nor that the bank, because we're open now till 7.
Yes.
And so I didn't know that you all did that on a Friday.
We did. They wanted to close the books up for the day
Yeah.
on Friday and then kind of reopen. And so that's what they did. But they wanted to stay open because there was a lot of people getting off work on Fridays, especially people that worked in Oklahoma City coming in and wanted to do their banking business before they went home, So that's why we started doing it. But we had to close it down for a little bit so we could get some of our work done,
Yes.
and whatever. And it worked out pretty good, really, all in all. But I don't know why we just didn't stay open and figure out a way. But I guess our mechanics of doing all that stuff was so slow in those days, we couldn't do it fast enough to get the customers in here and get our work done, I guess, at the
Did
time.
other banks stay open that late?
Some stayed open. Yes, they did. And not every day. It was
But on the Fridays.
on
that was
Fridays
typical.
usually. Yeah, it was usually kind of what they used to call banking hours. We usually were done by 3 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Most of the
I
time.
didn't know about the
Yeah.
reopening on Fridays.
Yeah, and so it was pretty good. We did a lot of business actually. There was a lot of people that once they realized we were
Yeah.
open, they would definitely make a point to come in, so they didn't have to do it on Saturday mornings or
Yeah.
any of that stuff. And kind of saved them some trouble down the road. So it worked
Yeah.
out really good. Yeah, that was one of those great ideas that I had. So
There's a lot of those epic moments I think are like only kind of Randy Granzow as a banker moments.
Well,
But I think it is infused like all three of those personalities. The collaboration that Gordon brought, where you wanted to, where there was freedom to make mistakes, but also that we need to learn from those mistakes and make sure we do the right thing going forward, to be calm under pressure, to be deliberate with decision making. Your grandfather and being relentless and focused, and having high accountability, and then your fun, mixing all those three things together, it really creates a unique culture that we get to carry forward from the last centuries.
well, I'll tell you what, and honestly, the last 10, 15 years, there's probably been more changes than we ever did in all the years we were here. And trying to keep up with all that is an unbelievable task, and the crew and the people that you got in here now doing all those things and helping out. It's incredible to me, that they can manage all the stuff, because it's exponential, so much bigger than what everything we ever had to deal with back when.
But that legacy, I think, if we didn't have that foundation, the legacy, I think it'd be really difficult for us to catch.
I think it'd be a different environment
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know what the environment would be, but it would be definitely a whole string of different events. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be the same way, but we are what we are, and we do what we do, and what we try to do is the same thing we tried to do, 100 years ago. Is
Yeah.
just make sure that people understand we're here for them. We got services for them. We can help them if we can help them, from a lending standpoint or a deposit standpoint or whatever we can help them with. That is our goal, and I don't think that's changed at all. I think that's pretty much the same thing. How you go about doing it, a whole different world. But I think the same theory is all there, I think.
I think the other thing that's really unique about Citizens is our ownership structure. And you have a family owned bank that's been tightly held for, what could have been tightly held for generations. But a change was made in the late 90s to form the employee stock ownership plan. And now it is as much of an owner in Citizens as the family is. Could you talk a little bit about why that was important to you?
Yeah, it was real important. There was some stock transfers being taken care of, and some things, and we wanted to make sure that we had, to some degree, control of what was going to happen. We didn't want it to go off into the sunset. So they came up with that plan and formed it, and as the stock would get bought up, then they would transfer it into the ESOP plan. And so it kind of built its own entity after a while, but it really worked out well, because then we had a place to maintain the ownership to some degree the same way it's always been. It's a little bit different, but to some degree it's pretty much close anyway. So it worked out really, really well, and there were a lot of attorneys involved in that decision. I can tell you that for sure.
Yes.
Make sure that it was all buttoned up the best we could, and it worked out surprisingly well. So that was just one of those good decisions that was made, and it just worked out as good as we could have hoped for it to work out.
And I remember when I came in 2009 and the bank had some difficulty during the financial crisis, you saying, we need to protect this bank ownership for the employees. I mean, it was really, even though you have ownership, the focus was really about protecting the bank for the ESOP. And so that stood out to me as something, that was carried forward that importance with this management team.
I think that was always important to everybody in my family anyway. I think we feel like we have a responsibility, and you can find a job anywhere, but find a job that you like and people that you like, and whatever, it's special. And when it's all real special, and it makes it even better, And so we had a lot of old time employees that we had to look at their future too, So I think that was always part of it. It kind of comes into the umbrella of the whole deal, But I think it was it was definitely a concern, and I think that was one thing that we really wanted to make sure that we could transfer things around the best we could and keep everybody employed and keep everybody hopping and bopping the best we could to make them all uh, feel comfortable down the road. It worked out pretty well. Yeah, and it's another one of those things that, like I said, it was a lot of legal stuff going on with that, and I'm not much of a legal guy, so I can't say I was in a whole lot of those conversations, but
It took a lot of effort to make
it
that
took a
decision.
lot, yeah, and there was a lot of people working a lot of hours to make sure that
Yeah.
it happened the way they wanted it to happen, and it did. So it worked out well.
One thing about Edmond is it's a golf mecca, but it wasn't always that way. There a long time ago there wasn't golfing here, and whenever you were in high school, you were an aspiring golfer and went on to be a great golfer. But can you talk about the story about this building and when you were trying out for the team and kind of what was happening here
Sure,
at the corner of First and Broadway?
you bet. A little quick history in Edmond Golf. There wasn't a golf course until Kickingbird got
Mhm.
built, and that got built while I was in college. So
Wow.
when we were in high school, there was no golf courses in Edmond, period. So we had to go to Oklahoma City to play if we were going to play. And the golf team just got started in 1964. And so I was playing as a sophomore in 1965. And I was on the second team that Edmond ever had. And so we were in Oklahoma City. We're doing a qualifying for matches, and so we're in Oklahoma City, and one of the guys comes up to me and he sits there and he goes, I think something's going on down at the bank, and I go, like what? And he sits there and he goes, I think they may have got robbed, and I go, really? And I said, he goes, maybe you ought to call home and see what's going on. I said, okay. So I couldn't get the bank to answer the phone, obviously. So I called my mom at home, and she was aware of the situation. And I said, "What happened?" And she goes, "Well, they had a gun at your dad's head, And I said, "Really?" And they go, "What happened then?" And she goes, "Well, they they weren't a violent group, thank goodness." And he sits there and they ended up tying everybody up and put them in the vault. And eventually they got loose and got out, and the bank robbers were gone, and the police were informed, the FBI was there, and all that stuff that goes on. And I said, "Was anybody get hurt?" And he goes, "No, no, nobody got hurt at all." And I said, "Okay, that's all I needed to know." And I headed to the first tee. I said, "Let's go." Nothing I can do about this. And I remember my dad, after I got home from qualifying and got home, and dad had just really gotten home a minute or two before me. And he sits there and I go, "Well, was it bad?" And he sits there and he goes, "Well, it was, yeah, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't terrible." He was so calm about things. I said, they went to the right guy. If you're going to rob somebody, he would be the guy because he's not going to get upset about anything. So he goes, "Yeah, it was kind of dicey for a while." I go, "Well, I'm glad everything worked out." And I said, "What's going on now?" And he goes, "Well, I've got to go to this party at such and such's house." So he headed off to this party. And I said, "Okay, great." So it was a bad incident, and it worked itself out over time. But it was in this building that we're in now, and it all happened right at 3 o'clock when the bank closed,
Mhm.
and they closed all the blinds in here so nobody could see them inside. And then they took every bit of money that they could find, and then tied everybody up and
Mhm.
left. So, but they found them eventually in California, I believe,
Oh
and
my
I
gosh.
think it's where it was. And I don't know. They didn't get you tell you how small the bank was. I think they only got like $60,000 or something. I mean, and that's probably everything we had.
Yeah.
Of course, we had to get more money in for the next day, it was all insured, but it had to get money in the next day. So we were down to Federal Reserve dealing with them and getting stuff done. But yeah, there's some interesting stories that go along with that robbery.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But could you, there's been some really special people that worked at the bank. I mean, tons of them, but there's been some standout ones. Could you talk a little bit about Geneva Brooks and
Unbelievable. Yeah. One of the the best days that maybe ever happened to this place. As a matter of fact, Geneva had worked at First National Bank of Edmond for a long time, and they had been bought out a couple of times, and so she had survived through all of that, and she was just kind of tired of fighting, the organizational parts of those big banks, and so our president Mark came up to her and said, "Geneva, we'd sure like to have you over our way if you'd be interested in that." And I said, "We're not going anywhere, and we think you really like it over here." And so she thought about it a little bit, and she goes, "That sounds like a great idea." She goes, "I'm just totally tired of fighting the war over here." I said, "Okay, great." So she took a couple of weeks off and came a couple of weeks later, and the next thing I know, we got more deposits coming in here than I'd ever seen ever, especially at one time. And I'm just going, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible," and nicest lady, just a sweet person to begin with, had a tremendous following of customers. So all these customers came, and so we ended up with a whole bunch of new customers as well as a whole bunch of new deposits. And she just kind of grew our bank by herself, basically, like by
Yes.
1/3 almost or something. It was incredible amount. And she loved being here, after she got kind of used to the situation over here. She kind of really liked it. And I told her, I said, "Geneva, if you need anything, don't ask anybody else. You just ask me and I'll take care of it. Whatever it is. I don't care how little or how big it is, And she goes, "Well, if I need this or yeah, just ask me. I'll get taken care of." So I became, I guess, her personal guardian for a while, But she stayed here until she, finally retired and passed away. But gosh, what a great lady she was. And a lot of our employees now have learned a lot about people skills and some of the nice things that she did for people. She was incredible. I thought I was a pretty good customer service person. I didn't hold a candle to what she was doing. I thought, gosh darn, I never even thought about being able to do that. Man, you had to really think ahead to kind of, she would go visit people in hospitals and whatever she would do. It just, she just took it all so personal. And I said, "Boy, this is great," and I was so happy to have her. And I know she was real happy here too, which made me feel good. So that went down real well, real
Yes.
well. She was definitely a special person.
Special person. I love sitting right where she was
You do,
sitting,
exactly.
and I try even park where she was parking, just so I want to be reminded. Because a very sweet person, also one that had high expectations of everyone around her too.
She
So
did.
um,
She knew what she was doing. She
she
wasn't any
did.
rookie in this league.
Not at all.
She knew what she was doing.
And I love it when you come inside the bank, because inevitably you'll see two or three people that have known you for years. We're one of the few banks, I think, where the lobby is still a hopping place.
Can happen.
I'd love to hear you describe like what it feels like just to be in the bank. I mean, it's somewhere where you grew up, and just what that feels like when you come in and have those interactions.
Yeah, it's from the dirt up, I guess you would call, in that building over there. I remember going into the drugstore and getting some gum or something, back in the old days. Next thing I know, it's a bank, but yeah, it's part of the family, as best I can describe it. It was personal uh, to granddad in his later years, definitely personal to dad because he was in charge of the whole thing. And then I sat here and watched it being built, and it's personal to me, So spent my whole career over there for the most part. So anyway, it is a special, and it feels it's changed a lot. I mean, the makeup and how it's set up and whatever, it's changed a lot. But people will come in and they'll go, "Well, remember when the lobby, it was in here, but you had the teller line over here, and this was over there, and this person sat there, and this person sat there, and all those kind of things that people do remember from back then." And it's real fun for me because a lot of the customers that I have are older than me to about 10 years younger than me, and so they're still around, multiple, like us, multiple generations of customers
Mhm.
also. I mean, I know I can think of some that I know are at least 5 generations just right off the top of my head. And I know there's a lot of us that are 4 generations through, and so there's a lot of generational, customers as well as generational employees and everything else. So it's been always good, and it's always good to see somebody I hadn't seen in a long time. That's the part that if you miss one thing, I'm going to say that's probably the part you miss the most is the people that you used to see on a real regular basis, and you don't see them for a long time, and all of a sudden you're in there and they pop up, and it's really so good to see them again, and it just brings back a lot of good times and what the old bank used to look like. I can picture it in my head, kind of the way it was, not
Yeah.
the way it is today. So
I love it whenever I'll be introduced to someone and they say you know you, and it's a very distinguished gentleman, businessman, and then you come over and then they leave and you're like, yeah, they were a wild guy back whenever they were younger, and just knowing so much of the history of Edmond, from not like the dirt up for the building, but also kind of Edmond itself. And
yeah, true.
just a few thousand people whenever you were
Yeah.
growing up here to now or 100,000.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember there was another lady that worked with Dad for years and years and years, and she had a bunch of relatives in several towns around here, so she kind of knew the surrounding area as well as Edmond, and she would go up and tell Dad sometimes. She goes, "Now, if this brother comes in, he's good, and like then he goes." Now, this other brother, said, be a little weary of this guy, and stuff. I mean, so they knew, I mean, that's how personal it was.
Yes.
Everybody knew, so it was real fun to get to know all these different people and personalities, and of course, Deer Creek was a little bitty place in those days, and all the farmers
Yes.
out there in Deer Creek became part of our organization, a big part of it in some ways. But there's multiple generations of those guys out there in Deer Creek area, that have always been here too. So we were multifaceted as far as what we would lend money on. There was a lot of farming, there was a lot of
Yeah.
small business, there was of course autos and homes and whatever else, but there was a lot of diversity. And it was kind of interesting because I only knew certain little things, but gosh, we had somebody in the bank that knew something about, if we needed somebody who knew something about farming, we knew people that would
Yeah.
deal with
It
farmers.
was really reflected the
Yeah,
community.
exactly.
So when you think about these next 125 years
Sure.
and how we can honor the Granzow family and what you all stand for, if there's all kinds of wonderful advances in medicine. So who knows, 100 years from now, you could be walking into the bank lobby. What do you hope that the bank continues to hold and be known for based upon this 125-year history?
What I envision is you got to, and this is where, and you know this as well as anybody, that where younger people are important because they keep up in a lot of new trends, and they are the next generation. So they are the next set of customers coming. So the people that deal with the younger people who become 30 and 40-year-olds and then eventually, retirees, they need to develop that same type of thing. Now, to do it in today's market is a lot trickier than it was in our market because we kind of knew, okay, this guy, he got married, he had a kid, so we know the kid, and the kid turned 16, he comes in and gets a car loan, we know him, the next generation, here we go. Nowadays everything is so technical and so digital or whatever terminology you want to use for it. It's harder, I would say, a lot harder to keep up with all of that uh, progress, I will call it, than it used to be. So keeping that personal side, I think, is the part that I would like to see keep going. And that's when I'm glad that people will still come into the bank and still
Yes.
need to talk to us, or whatever. I hope they do anyway. So I want that to continue on, but I think we got to keep up with the times and make sure that we're ahead of the curve, or at least in the curve, for all the new advances that are going to happen. We know it's It's going to happen. We just can't stop it.
Yeah, I think that's where when I think about my opportunity to be able to work with you, and then thinking about your how you describe your dad, knowing your dad,
Yeah.
but then and hearing you describe your grandfather, fusing all that together because you were always so modern and progressive and fun and engaged with the team and really kind of one of the team. With your dad kind of being this like constant, very risk mitigator,
Yeah.
thoughtful, and your grandfather having more of a commanding type of control. If we can combine those three things and bring them forward, we should be in good shape to keep that real personal service.
I think so. Yeah, and I think it's harder to do than it used to be, no doubt. But I think it's possible, and as long as it's possible, it can happen.
Well,
Yeah.
keep holding us accountable to that. So, thank you so much, Randy.
Well,
It's meant
thanks.
a lot. If
My
anything
pleasure.
else comes to mind, we can get it on camera. But I think we captured a lot of it. So
Okay,
really
great,
appreciate it.
awesome.